Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How many of you have heard of national heritage areas? Anyone? Oh, good. Probably the Blackstone, which is the closest. There are 61 others across the country, however, and I never knew a thing about them until I started asking questions. National heritage areas are not national parks, though they're designated by the National Park Service and funded by them. They are designed to highlight some particular theme, mostly historical themes, and then invite people to learn about the resources in the community. Nothing is owned or controlled by the national parks or the federal government. These are all local grassroots efforts. And I thought this would be the right way to go in helping people understand some parts of history before the United States that occurred right in our backyard. So if you take a look at one of the brochures on your table, you will see inside that a map that looks just like that, and you'll be able to read it a little better. I want to create a national heritage area in a place called Sowams. Anybody ever heard the name Sowams? You know, probably if you lived around Barrington, you would have heard it. There's a Sowams Road, Sowams School, but that's a name that has disappeared 400 years ago. But I discovered that that name actually appears right here over Warren Town Hall. And I went by that year after year and never understood what it meant. What Sowams is this area, the southern area, if you will, of Rhode Island and Massachusetts. The map to the upper left reveals that it goes from the Taunton River over to the Seekonk River. So it's actually 12 rivers, named rivers between those two. So it's this whole area that was part of Usamequin's territory. How many have heard the name Usamequin? Maybe a few people, if you worked in Plymouth at the museum, you would know that name. But most people know him by Massasoit. But Massasoit was a title. That wasn't his name. His name was Yellowfeather, Usamequin. And he led over 31 tribes and sub-tribes throughout this whole southeastern area. In fact, if you look at the Sellers map that was produced in 1675, you will read, and I don't have a pointer here, but it says Pokanoket country, King Philip's country. There was no Wampanoag tribe then. Usamequin lived in today's Warren. He was the one who met with the Pilgrims in March of 1621 and signed an agreement, a treaty, if you will, the 6 points, basically saying, you won't harm us, we won't harm you. If somebody tries to harm you, we'll come to your defense and you'll do the same for us. Basic treaty. Okay. That treaty allowed the survival of the Pilgrims. Had that treaty not been in effect, we'd probably be speaking French or Algonquin or something else. But the only reason they survived was because of that agreement and the help that they got from the Pokanoket tribe. How many have heard the word Pokanoket? Oh, good. It's getting out there. It takes a while after 400 years. These are the treaty, by the way, lasted for over 50 years. I happened to live right next to that park in Warren. And this all started the month after I retired, when a collection of tribes from Mashpee came and started digging a hole in the park and put in a 10 by 10 foot concrete crypt and reburied the Massasoit, who had been dug up there in 1913 by the town librarian and amateur archaeologist Charles Carr, because people were looting the graves in what was basically a sand and gravel pit for the railroad. So he removed 42 graves. You would not do that today. But he felt that if people were simply stealing things, he might as well take them, and he put them in museums in New York, Washington, Eppenrefer, Brown, Harvard, etc. So there they were. In 1990, the Native American Gravesite Reclamation Act enabled the tribes to go to those museums and get everything that was a funerary object, something that came from burial, back to the tribes. Over 650 items, many of them very small beads and things of that sort, were placed in that crypt and then covered over. And you can go there today in Warren and see the reburial place of Usamequin, who had died in 1660 in Brookfield and was carried by tribe members down to his home in Warren. So that's where the tribe was really centered, was this area we call Sowams, and it extends basically up to Providence and over to the Taunton River, Somerset and Swansea. So you can come and find many of these places, and they're on the map there. If you go on the website, you click on the map and it takes you to each of those sites. So when you don't have anything to do and you're on the other side of the river, start exploring. There are lots of places to find, like going from the upper left over Town Hall. The center top picture is a spring that was known to be Usamequin's tribal spring, right in Warren. To the right, how many people have been to Mount Hope Farm? Okay, in Bristol. Next time you go there, go to the office. It has to be on a weekday. They're not open on weekends. And tell them that you want to visit the seat of Metacom. That's pictured in the upper right. That was the ceremonial seat then for the Pokanoket tribe and is today. I was just there last week for a renewal ceremony. So it's an active place. However, it's owned by Brown University because it was given to them by Rudolph Eppenrefer in 1953 by his family. The tribe is working very actively with Brown University to get their sacred land back. In the middle left, you drive by this. If you go to Johnson's Market on Route 136, Swansea into Warren, okay, just past that, and we now have a marker there, is Kings Rock, and on the other side of the street is Sacham's Knoll with a perched boulder there. Okay, nobody knew anything about it. It turns out that was Wamsutta, the Massasoit's eldest son, his home, and the area there. It's also not far from a place called Margaret's Cave, where Roger Williams was nursed back to health for 14 weeks before he went on to found Providence. It's on private property, but if you get a hold of me, I'll put you on the list and tell you about the next tour there. That's Margaret's Cave in the middle, the center picture. Not far from there is in Swansea is the Martin House. It's marked 1728, but we believe the first house was actually before 1700. But it is open during the summer on Sunday afternoons, and they do a great job of training high school kids from Somerset and Swansea to give guided tours of the house. So you can go back to the 17th century. They've got a cool breastplate from the time when the English were protecting themselves from arrows and guns. Fun place to visit. And the bottom left is Sowams Woods in Barrington, a beautiful area. There are many of these areas around here that we've discovered that have not been changed or built on in the past 400 years. So there are pieces, if you will, of the original Sowams still around. You just have to know where to go. Back behind the Kickamuit Middle School in Warren, there is a marker for Hugh Cole, who is a colonist who grew up in Plymouth and then moved there, got to know Philip, the Massasoit's youngest son. His first son was poisoned, by the way. But the youngest unknown called Philip, who was medical, befriended Paul, and at the start of the King Philip War, which broke out right across the street from the Kickapoo Middle School. I've got a marker right there to Child Street, but you can read about it. Yeah, this is, King Philip War, what's that? And, oh yeah, it started right here. Anybody know where it ended? On Mount Hope.
Bristol.
Yeah, where Philip was shot, killed, beheaded, quartered, and his head stuck on a pike in Plymouth for 20 years.
20 years.
As a warning, don't ever do this again. If you're over in Swansea, Christ Church is one of the earliest churches and started in 1693. And you probably drive by it frequently. It's right up in one of the sides. And then in the lower right, there's, I think that's Anawan Rock, which is on off Route 44 in Rehoboth. So these 9 towns constitute the area. There are other places in Providence, Roger Williams Springs, Stephen Hopkins' house. You can go to the charter room in the State House in Providence. You can visit the ancient Little Neck Cemetery where Elizabeth Tilley, who came out across on the Mayflower, the Newman Church in East Providence, a new mural of the Pokanoket Sagamore in East Providence, near Wachamoket Square, if you know where that is. And if you look in the lower right, that's the Carpenter Museum, not far from Anawan Rock and Rehoboth, and you can see artifacts from that time period. Just to wrap up here, we have a steering committee that is working on transforming this area and applying, finishing a feasibility study that will go to the National Park Service. These are ways of enhancing and inviting people in to not just learn about this early history, but to find all the other resources in the area. I don't know if I have a minute for questions.
You have plenty of time for questions.
Okay.
I have a question. Does it help that the Taunton is a wild and scenic river?
Absolutely. We got a grant from the Taunton Scenic River Council and worked with Bill Napolitano. Does anybody know him?
Yeah.
Okay. Who was part of the SERPED. He's on our steering committee, and that anything like that helps. This is about the environment. Mostly people think about this as tourism, but this is a way to really bring attention to an area. There are a number of projects that have been done, USDA projects on the Palmer River in Rehoboth. The river doesn't stop at the state line. It does not respect those boundaries. So why should we stop at the state line? We take in all of this area and really look at enhancing it. If any of you knew the Blackstone River in 1990 when the heritage area started, how would you describe it?
I think, as I recall, it was polluted, overrun, with there was a lot of development in the area. It wasn't something that people actually.
It's a place to avoid.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Today, it's a beautiful place, and with all kinds of places along the river, boat trips.
Yeah.
I mean, that shows you how you can take an area that nobody liked and transform it. Take some time, but when you identify an area and then bring some resources in, the national parks through Congress awards $500,000 a year for up to 15 years. So that's an opportunity to seed various projects within that area. Just let me ask, how many people are from Somerset or Swansea? Just a few. Okay. Anybody from Bristol? All right. If you're in Fall River or Tiverton or some other area here, it doesn't mean that you can't participate in this process. In fact, if anything, we're looking for people from outside the area who might want to make some suggestions about things we can do. Yeah.
For some of those pictures that you had shown of, the untapped areas, are there people that go through there every now and then and try to look for artifacts from back in the day?
There's that again.
Well, you had shown them at the beginning, some of those pictures, you said there's some untapped areas that nobody
Oh,
can
yeah.
get into. Do people actually go in there and search for artifacts still?
Unfortunately. But
Yeah.
But
not
not
the
a
right
part of,
people.
you're
Yeah.
not a part of this group?
Sowams Woods, for instance, there were, in early nineties, there was a PAL, Public Archaeology Laboratory, brought a crew in because they knew there would be artifacts there, and actually discovered a series of stone hearths, fireplaces, if you will, that had been used there. And what they learned is that that location really had been set aside for women in the time of childbirth as a place of peace. So there's some things we know.
All right.
Looks like we have it. Okay.
Yes, well, before you go anywhere, thank you very much. This was fascinating and we had a nice discussion.
Yes. She worked in Plymouth.
I think many of them know that.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's
we know
good.
the same stuff.
Yeah, so it was really fascinating. And I chose the 5 o'clock.
Oh.
Well, let's bring another meeting.